Zamislite svoju zemlju i jednu generaciju u budućnosti nakon donošenja zakona po kojem sva industrija mora biti neotrovna, biorazgradiva i održiva. Zvuči kao nemoguća misija. No ona postaje moguća ako poznajete jednu posebnu biljku. Konoplju. Još daleke 1941. Henry Ford je izradio autokaroseriju od bioplastike dobivene od konoplje, koja je bila 6 puta lakša od čelične i 10 puta otpornija na sudare. Konoplja može biti jednako korisna kod prehrane, medicine zdravlja, kao i kod proizvodnje betona ili tkanine. Uz to ona vitalizira tlo, a kako godišnje naraste do nekoliko metara predstavlja bogat izvor biomase bez devastacije prašuma. Ta čarobna biljka nas vraća u vrijeme od prije 100 godina kada su svijet pokretali ugljikohidrati, kad su sva vlakna, goriva i lijekovi bili proizvod fotosinteze. U 20. stoljeću ugljikohidrate su zamijenili ugljikovodici koji se dobivaju iz nafte i ugljena skupom tehnologijom, do koje tek malobrojni mogu doći, dok svatko može posaditi u svom vrtu konoplju. A ponekad i ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Dobro večer. Rick Simpson, autor je filma Bijeg od lijeka, Run from the Cure, u kojem je predstavio svoje otkriće izuzetnih medicinskih učinaka ulja od konoplje. Svega je to učinilo jednim od najvećih stručnjaka na tu temu, pa ćemo se danas raspitati kakve sve proizvodne i poljoprivredne mogućnosti krije industrijska konoplja, kako bi to uopće ekonomija bila temeljna na konoplji, a potom ćemo raspraviti i najvjerojatnije medicinske mogućnosti te biljke. Dobro večer.
Nice to be with you.
Za početak, koje sve mogućnosti ta biljka koju zovemo konoplja i znamo da postoji kao industrijska konoplja zapravo krije, koje smo danas u velikoj mjeri i zaboravili i na neki način su nekad bile uobičajene pa danas su skoro egzotične?
Well, it's basically limitless. I mean, we can use the plant in so many different ways. You know, food, fuel, fiber, textiles. The list is endless. They estimate today that we can build 50,000 different things from the hemp plant. You know, hemp plastics, a wonderful fuel supply, both diesel and, through ethanol. And, I mean, with the use of this plant, grown in a large scale, we don't have to cut down any more trees. We can put an end to starvation. I mean, up until a few decades ago here, hemp was freely grown all over the world. And that's the way it has to become again, because we're poisoning our planet with all these fossil fuels.
Prošećemo malo kroz povijest. Koliko se duboko u povijest može pratiti diljem svijeta korištenje konoplje?
Well, it goes back to ancient times. In the Czech Republic, they actually have some pottery there. And they looked at the design that was put on the pottery, and they said it was from hemp rope. Well, the pottery was dated to be 26,000 years old. So I think we've been using this plant for quite some time.
Na koje sve načine? Recimo, Kinezi su bili vrlo, kako bih rekao, prepoznali su koristi od konoplje vrlo davno, prije čak 5000 godina. U koje sve svrhe?
Well, the paper and everything that they made, I mean, the Chinese were making paper with hemp. The medicinal use, the oldest medicinal use in history goes back to ancient China, 2800 BC. That's one of the first writings about the medicinal use. And all through history, it's been known to be a wonderful medicine. 200 years after Christ, Chinese surgeons were doing painless organ manipulations and amputations with the use of hemp resin and wine as an anesthetic. But the uses, I mean, we made clothing from it, we made ropes, we made sails, we made books. The Bible was printed, the whole Bibles were printed on hemp. In the States, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, written on hemp. But yet today we can't have it.
Jedan stari mornar mi je ispričao kako su užad od konoplje koja su se prije koristila na brodovima bila neizmjerno zapravo čvršća od bilo kakvih sintetičkih vlakana. Koliko sam shvatio, i jedra su se isto radila nekada od konoplje, od tuda je njihov izraz.
Yes. Well, I mean, the hemp ropes were very strong. But the biggest thing with the use of hemp, it's earth-friendly. It's not plastic. It's not polluting our environment. Like you see plastic everywhere along, ocean frontage today, buckets, pails, things that float in from the ocean, and they'll sit there for years. If they were made of hemp plastics, they would just be biodegradable and they would do no harm to the earth.
Izraz canvas za jedra zapravo i dolazi od riječi kanabis, toliko je bila popularna u tim mornarskim poslovima. Spomenuli ste da je odjeća od konoplje praktički neuništiva. Je li to točno ili je to tek mit?
Oh, it's wonderful clothing. As far as I know, the word cannabis is actually the Dutch pronunciation for cannabis. But, I mean, back in the 1800s, Levi Strauss, when he made his first, what we called blue jeans with the studs in them, he made them out of hemp plants, they were made from the hemp plant. But here, not too many years ago, a couple cowboys discovered a pair of these old pants laying out on the prairies. They took them, and they were still pants after, and they were over 100 years old. They took them and they dated them, and these were some of the old original hemp jeans that Levi Strauss made, and they sold them at auction for $150,000.
Nije loše za jedne hlače. Kada pričamo o utjecaju konoplje na tlo, koliko se u dostupnoj literaturi može pročitati, konoplja zapravo hrani tlo, dapače kada su poljoprivredna tla iscrpljena od kemijske obrade i slično, na sličan način kao i korovi, tako i konoplje mogu vraćati minerale i slično. Kakve su prema vašim spoznajama u stvari utjecaj konoplje na tla i uopće na poljodjelstvo?
Well, hemp detoxifies the soil. Soils that have been poisoned, it detoxifies the soil. And, of course, the roots of the hemp plant go very deep, and they stay in the ground. And as they deteriorate, then they're providing nutrients for other crops. But I know in Virginia, they grew hemp there for many, many years, and they didn't have to rotate the hemp crop. They just grew hemp year after year, and it didn't depreciate the land. And like I said, the food source from hemp is just truly beyond belief. I mean, one female hemp plant can provide an enormous amount of seeds. And we need that food source today on this earth.
Na koje se načine industrijska konoplja koristi kao hrana? I gdje je i ko koristi, s obzirom da ja nisam imao prilike to vidjeti?
Well, the hemp seeds themselves, I mean, if you have nothing else to live on, if you have hemp seeds, you'll never starve to death. They say that Buddha lived for 6 years on one hemp seed a day. I kind of doubt that. I think maybe it was a handful. But it has all of the omega-3, the omega-6. It has everything you need for healthy life. And it's like I said, when you see people today starving to death in these countries, in these harsh climates, well, hemp will grow in a harsh climate. So we could end all these people starving. Grow the hemp plant. It's the answer.
Znači, industrijska konoplja je prilagodljiva i za teške klime. Mogu li se njome sariti pustinje, goli obroci, planina i slično?
Well, I would love to do an experiment like this. I would like to go to the edge of a desert somewhere and then just slowly every year take and plant more and more like into the desert. And I'm sure you can reclaim deserts, because another wonderful aspect of this plant with the roots going so deeply, like you can prevent soil erosion. Like that is so bad now, like in Madagascar and Borneo. They cut their trees down, the soil is all eroding. If they would just plant hemp plants, that would stop the erosion.
Mi ovdje u Hrvatskoj imamo jednu planinu koja se zove Velebit, koja ima gole obronke tamo gdje su prije bila stabla, pa često puta zamišljam kako bi zapravo nasadi konoplje mogli ponovno revitalizirati sloj. Prema ovom što vi kažete, to bi zapravo i moglo. Danas živimo u vrijeme kad je industrijska konoplja zapravo nešto čak egzotično, kao što smo čuli, vladaju ugljikovodici, a ne više ugljikohidrati. No, prije jedno 200 godina u SAD-u, od kuda stižete, se zapravo čak i porez plaćao indijskom konopljem. Zbog čega? O čemu se tu radilo?
Well, there were actually, where hemp was so necessary in those times, back in the 1700s, if you were a farmer in North America, you were forced to grow hemp. It was against the law not to grow it, because they needed that source for their canvas and for their ropes and their paper. It was widely used. So, when you look at it today, it seems insane. Now it's outlawed and no one can grow it.
Najfascinantnija strana konoplje kada je primijenimo na ovom modernom svijetu je to što ona zapravo može pokretati i grijati domove i automobile, pokretati praktički onom količinom koju čovjek može sam uzgojiti. Na koji način se konoplja može koristiti za gorivo za automobile ili za grijanje kuće i u kojim zapravo količinama je potrebno da bi mogla ostvariti te ciljeve?
Well, in the old scale, they used to say like 1 acre of hemp. Now, an acre is 208 feet by 208 feet each way.
Oko 40 metara, znači po 40.
A bit more, I think more like 60 meters each way. But off of 1 acre of ground, the old scale, they could produce 500 gallons of ethanol off the hemp that was grown on that acre. And on top of that, the seeds from the plants themselves, although it's a shame to burn them as a fuel because they're so nutritious, but if you cold press the seeds, you can use hemp seed oil to run your diesel. You can run your tractor or your truck off the hemp seeds. But with these new processes they have today, enzyme processes, I've never been present when it was done, but they're saying that they can get as much as 1,800 gallons off that same acre of land. Now, that's just a very small piece of land. I mean, if you could actually get 1,800 gallons off 1 acre, then 500 gallons would run your car all year long. The other 1,000 gallons would heat your house, heat your hot water. You would become energy independent. You would be self-sufficient. And it's a wonderful, healthy thing to do. Grow hemp, water it. It's a wonderful plant.
Dobro je zapravo kod konoplje što u jednoj godini izraste barem neke vrste užasno puno, ponekad po 3-4 metra, što znači da skoro da se ne može usporediti ni sa jednom drugom biljkom, a kamoli sa sjećom stabala kojima treba po 20 godina da izrastu.
Well, no, it's already been proven. When you plant a tree, it takes about 40 years for the tree to mature. But if you actually took, instead of cutting down an acre of trees, if you took that same acre and planted it in hemp, you would actually produce more pulp and paper from that acre. Plus, you would provide a constant way of employment for people. These hemp-based industries could be spread worldwide. You can build cars, you can build boats, airplanes, anything you want from hemp. It's 2/3 the weight of steel and 10 times stronger.
Malo je poznato da se od konoplje može dobivati vrlo dobra plastika u stvari. Uglavnom je danas dobijamo od naftnih derivata, međutim konoplja je također sposobna, ako sam dobro shvatio, proizvoditi bioplastiku.
Oh yes, hemp makes wonderful plastic. Everything that we have today can be made with hemp plastic. And the amazing thing with that plant, it's got the highest cellulose count of any plant on Earth. It's something like 77%. And that's what makes it such a wonderful energy source.
Na internetu se danas može naći slike puno proizvoda proizvedenih od konoplje. To su potpuno u našoj svijesti nepovezive stvari kad vidite tenisice od konoplje, električne gitare od konoplje, stolove od konoplje, stolce od konoplje i sve ovo drugo što zapravo prikazuju slike koje se mogu vidjeti. Najfascinantnija priča vezana uz konoplju je kada, to sam nedavno saznao, da se karoserije automobila mogu i da su se stvarale efikasno upravo od konoplje. Kada je to bilo rađeno i s kakvim učincima?
Well, it was 1941. Henry Ford brought out his hemp car. And it's all over the internet. The pictures are there. It's a very nice looking automobile. But there's some very famous footage of him out there with a sledgehammer in the wintertime hitting the trunk of a car, the back of the car, with this sledgehammer. And he couldn't even put a dent in it. But yet we drive around today in metal cars that rust. Hemp doesn't rust. We should all be driving around in hemp cars. It would be safer and they would last forever.
Koliko sam shvatio, ti karoserija od bioplastika od konoplje je lakša i čvršća. U kojoj mjeri?
Well, it's 2/3 the weight of the steel. If you had a same size car and a steel body, it would weigh 3,000 pounds. But if you have it made out of hemp, it would weigh 2,000 pounds. So 1/3 lighter, but yet it is 10 times stronger. The material is 10 times stronger than steel.
I tek kad se čovjek oporavi od tog šoka da može svirati na električnoj gitari od konoplje ili džogirati u tenisicama od konoplje ili voziti auto na konoplju ili grijati kuću na konoplju ili slično, dolazi iznenađenjima nema kraja. Naime, od konoplje se također može proizvoditi i beton, odnosno građevni materijal za kuće. Na koji način se to radi i o kakvom je materijalu riječ i kakve su njegove osobine u odnosu na klasične betone koje koristimo?
Well, ordinary concrete, most of the time, I mean, they're mixing rocks and gravel in with it until it hardens up. Well, in this case, the hempcrete I seen in the Czech Republic, they had just taken small pieces of hemp from the plant that was dry, and they mixed that in, you know, instead of the rocks. And it made it more like an insulation. So it would be easier to heat. And but the building materials, I mean, it's limitless. You can build lumber from hemp. You can build anything that you can imagine. A table, the chairs, your car, your home, everything could be built from hemp.
Drugim riječima, od biljke koja raste u vrtu iza kuće. Danas industrijska konoplja, pogotovo onaj njen bratanac koji ima i medicinske učinke, a u sebi sadrži THC, u većini zemalja nije zakonski dopušten. Međutim, kao što smo vidjeli, u prošlosti je konoplja bila prihvaćena i uobičajena biljka. William Randolph Hearst, američki magnat, je 30. godina pokrenuo jednu zapravo dosta histeričnu medijsku kampanju o ludilu od jointa, pa se onda počelo slike kanabisa i te kulture za vlakna i važnog izvora ulja vezati nekakvi citati kao recimo pogana vražlja trava s korijenjem u paklu i slično. I u stvari suzbijanje konoplje popločila put jednoj sasvim drugoj vrsti svjetske ekonomije, u čijim rezultatima imamo danas prilike uživati dok vozimo super skupi benzin ili se poljoprivredna tla uništavaju obradama i slično. Naravno, umjesto konopljenih vlakana imamo petrokemijska, najlon, polijester i sve što smo već rekli. No, ono što je također zanimljivo jest da je u 19. stoljeću konoplja bila praktički uobičajen izvor sirovine za izradu raznih lijekova. Na koji način se konoplja u farmaceutskoj industriji u njenim početcima koristila, sa kakvim učincima, do kada je to zapravo bilo legalno?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry more or less came into the aspect of hemp medicine in the mid-1800s. Now, it was known throughout history that hemp was the most medicinal plant on earth. The ancient Persian religious text, the Vinadad, written 700 years before Christ, they listed the most medicinal plants known to man. Now, this is 700 years before Christ. The number one plant on that list, cannabis hemp. So it's no secret, you know, what this can do as a medicine. But all through history, I mean, they used it as a medicine, and then in the mid-1800s, well, the pharmaceutical companies in those days, what was common practice? I mean, they would make the essential oils for many different medicinal herbs and plants and provide them to the people as a medicine. But there was only one problem with what they did is, I mean, obviously they would have made the essential oil from the hemp plant since it was known to be the most medicinal. Well, the minute they produce that oil, they're producing the same oil that I've been healing everyone with. So the pharmaceutical industry, I think, has known how to cure cancer, I'd say, for at least 150 years. And, I mean, I've looked into this very deeply. Eli Lilly, Parker Davis, Squibb, these big companies we have today, they were all, back years ago, they were all providing hemp-based medicines. But not one of them ever provided the essential oil from the hemp plant. They provided tinctures that were watered down with alcohol, or Eli Lilly in the 1880s sold hash pills as painkillers. So, I mean, they're certainly familiar with what this plant does, but the problem was, in those days, you couldn't patent the plant, and farmers everywhere were growing hemp every place freely. There was no law against it. And I think those drug companies lived in fear of, you know, if those farmers found out that if they could make this simple oil from the crop they were growing in their backyard, well, the drug companies would be out of business. So then in the 1880s, they started putting chemicals together, and then you can patent that. So that's what they did. And then in the early 1900s, Rockefeller, he came along. Of course, Randolph Hearst, he came along with the yellow journalism, you know, against hemp, the assassin of youth. What a joke. But Rockefeller, he started the medical foundations around 1906. Him and his rich friends got together. And in those days, there was two forms of medicine. There was the empiric medicine, medicine from plants, and that's what most people were still, you know, going. If they got sick, they went to the guy that sold the empiric medicine. And then there was the other fella, he was doing the allopathic medicine from chemicals. But they weren't getting much business. But when Rockefeller and his friends formed the foundations, they went the allopathic approach. They shoved the empiric medicine right out the back door. They went the allopathic approach because who owned the chemical factories? They did. How do they sell their chemicals to the public? Well, we make it into a medicine. And basically since that time, the public has been taking chemicals thinking that it's going to heal them. And chemicals and poisons don't heal. They're harmful to the body. Natural medicines, medicines from plants, empiric medicine. And hemp is the queen of all empiric healers. It should have never been outlawed. It's the most wonderful medicine on this planet.
Zanimljivo je što se konoplja zapravo može oprašivati i bez pčela, pogotovo u današnje vrijeme kada vidimo da, nažalost, pčele na tajanstven način umiru i nestaju po svijetu.
Well, yes, the bees are dying at an alarming rate, and that is very serious news for mankind. But another piece of good news when it comes to the hemp plant, you know, there's males and females. They come in both sexes, and when the males open their pods, then the wind, they don't need a bee. The wind will carry the pollen to the female, and then the female will seed. So even without bees, if we grow hemp, we won't starve to death.
Prošli smo sada kratko povijesti i sve mogućnosti koje konoplja pruža. Danas se na sve više mjesta u svijetu počinje prepoznavati medicinska, a i razna druga vrijednost konoplje, a u nekim zemljama našla i svoj legalni put do onih kojima može pomoći.
Društveno i političko okružje Sjedinjenih država utjecalo je potkraj 19. i tijekom prve polovice 20. stoljeća na potiskivanje znanstvenih istraživanja konoplje. Stereotipno poistovjećivanje konoplje s psihoaktivnim učincima i zakonskom zabranom rekreativne uporabe doveli su do smanjivanja njezine primjene i u industriji.
Osnovni legalni problem vezan uz konoplju je legislativa Ujedinjenih naroda, koja se tiče i medicinske primjene konoplje. Jedina konvencija o narkoticima formulirana je 1961. i izravno spominje konoplju kao narkotičku biljku bez medicinske svrhe, tako da stavlja izvan zakona svaku njenu uporabu, osim u slučaju da pojedina država dozvoli medicinsko istraživanje konoplje. A u tom slučaju mora osnovati nacionalni ured koji će se baviti kultivacijom, distribucijom i izdavanjem potrebnih dozvola. Nažalost, američki ured trenutno služi samo onemogućavanju svake aktivnosti, tako da tamo nema nekog napretka u pogledu medicinske primjene konoplje.
Prekretnica se dogodila u Nizozemskoj, kada je vlada pokrenula istraživanja o medicinskim potencijalima konoplje.
In 2000, I think, we had a health minister.
Oko 2000. godine suprug ministrice zdravstva Els Borst obolio je od raka. Na temelju iskustva svojeg muža tijekom traženja lijeka za rak, shvatila je kako su pacijenti odlazili u coffee shopove gdje su tražili lijek koji bi bio dobar za njih. Oboljeli od raka često puše konoplju kao sredstvo protiv mučnine, povraćanja slabog apetita, nesanice i boli. Shvaćala je da za ljude kojima uistinu treba konoplja, kupovina u coffee shopu nije najbolje rješenje. Kvaliteta lijeka mora biti kontrolirana i pouzdana. Kao liječnica opće prakse znala je da odluke mora potkrijepiti znanstvenim dokazima, pa je istražila literaturu i naučila sve o konoplji. Utvrdila je da su tadašnje spoznaje bile dostatne da se konoplja može smatrati ozbiljnim lijekom.
Godine 2001. Els Borst osnovala je Ured za medicinsku primjenu konoplje u Nizozemskoj. Organiziran je distribucijski sustav zahvaljujući kojem pacijenti s liječničkim receptom konoplju mogu dobiti u ljekarnama. Molekularni biolog Arno Hazekamp u tom je razdoblju počeo raditi na doktoratu o konoplji.
Research lasted until 2007.
Istraživanje je trajalo do 2007. godine. Razvili smo današnji oblik programa medicinske primjene konoplje, što znači da konoplju sada uzgajamo u optimalnim uvjetima s potpunom kontrolom kvalitete, bez pesticida, teških metala, bakterija i gljivica. Dobivamo konzistentan i pouzdan proizvod.
Utvrđena je i lista bolesti kod kojih su zamijećene dobrobiti pri uporabi konoplje.
And at the top of the list were...
Na vrhu su te liste bolesti poput multiple skleroze, kroničnih bolova, Turetova sindroma, glaukoma, očne bolesti od koje postupno gubite vid. Za te je bolesti dopuštena terapija konopljom. Znanstvena otkrića o konoplji u međuvremenu su napredovala, pa bismo na taj popis mogli dodati i bolesti poput epilepsije i poremećaja pažnje. Osobno sam napravio analitičku studiju svih kliničkih testiranja djelovanja konoplje u posljednjih 5 godina i iz nje je očito da najviše dokaza o djelotvornosti konoplje postoji kod bolesti multiple skleroze, bolnih grčeva i kronične boli.
Patim dosta i od nesanica, i od tjeskobe, anksioznosti, a to je sve onda dalje djelovalo na moj principu sveopći razvoj osobnosti, ne? Jer ako ste neispavani, ne možete učiti, mislim, to je lančana reakcija, ne? Onda sam u dobi od nekih 20 godina svojih došao u kontakt sa kanabisom i iznenadao sam se kakve efekte mi je pružio, ne? Znači, jedan osjećaj mirnoće, smirenosti, žigaravica mi je prestala mučiti, počeo sam normalno i spavati, i jesti, počeo sam jednostavno bolje funkcionirati, ne? Ta konzumacija je trajala nekih 10 godina, evo, i pošto je u takvom statusu kakvom je pravnom, kad tad se moralo doći do, recimo, sukoba sa zakonom, ne? Imam i dalje tremor ruku, čak i uz te tablete, taj Sanval, popijem 10 mg, pa se probudim 3-4 sata, znači opet je ta nesanica počela mučiti. Ne?
Marko je pisao Ministarstvu zdravstva, pučkom pravobranitelju i predsjedniku Republike. Raspitivao se o mogućnostima reguliranja medicinskog kanabisa za pacijente u Hrvatskoj. O tom problemu razgovarao je i sa svojim liječnicom.
Ona isto veli da mi ne može pomoći, da se mogu javiti u Vinogradsku, jer su oni zaduženi kao za uvoz novih lijekova. Pa sam i njima pisao, oni isto veli da su nemogućnosti zbog pravnih propisa tako nešto realizirati u Hrvatskoj.
Kompanija Bedrocan je jedna od 2 kompanije u svijetu koja se legalno bavi uzgojem medicinskog kanabisa i moja iskustva su prekrasna. Mislim, to je jedna zbilja uhodana firma koja ima cijeli zatvoren ciklus proizvodnje, oni znači isključivo proizvode lijek za medicinske svrhe, odnosno taj lijek koji oni proizvode to su cvjetovi biljke kanabis, koji su u potpunosti standardizirani, dakle oni iz svakog usjeva, svakog uzgoja točno znaju što na kraju dobe, a pacijentima je to jako bitno zato što pacijent ne može uzeti neki kanabis sa ulice ili iz coffee shopa jer on niti je standardiziran, niti je higijenski ispravan i dobar.
Uglavnom radim kao predstojnik odjela za istraživanje i razvoj u Bedrocanu, nizozemskoj tvrtki za uzgoj medicinske konoplje. Bedrocan ima dugogodišnje iskustvo u uzgoju povrća i bilja u teškim uvjetima, često i u zatvorenim prostorijama uz kontrolu razine svjetla i vlage, te je bio idealan ponuđač za uzgoj medicinske konoplje. Tvrtka opskrbljuje državni program medicinske primjene konoplje. Njihovu konoplju dobivaju pacijenti, a rabi se i za istraživanja u Nizozemskoj i inozemstvu. Dio uroda odlazi i farmaceutskim tvrtkama koje se bave razvojem lijekova zasnovanih na konoplji.
Ograničena agronomska istraživanja o prinosu i kvaliteti stabljike konoplje provodila se i u Hrvatskoj. Istraživanja doktorice Zvijezdane Augustinović s Visokog gospodarskog učilišta u Križevcima pokazala su da konoplja ima izvrsna svojstva. Tijekom kontroliranog uzgoja nisu bili potrebni nikakvi pesticidi, nije se pojavio niti jedan nametnik, tlo je bilo bez korova. Tijekom 3 godine istraživanja koje su bile klimatski različite, vlakna i ukupna biomasa konoplje bili su u skladu ili nešto iznad europskog prosjeka. Inženjerica poljoprivrede Marta Gold sa skupinom entuzijasta pokrenula internetsku stranicu Medicinski kanabis, gdje je popularizirala primjere regulirane uporabe medicinskog kanabisa u Nizozemskoj. U svom preddiplomskom radu obradila je bioetička i društvena gledišta o konoplji.
U bioetičkim aspektima znači pričamo o samom senzibilitetu javnosti i o nekim moralnim vrijednostima i uopće o bioetičkim aspektima, da li uopće upotrebljavati konoplju ili ne, koje su zakonske prepreke, što sami ljudi mogu oko toga napraviti, a u društvenim aspektima proučavam, znači sam proučavala sve kroz povijest. Mislim, to ljudi se bave konopljom. Ona je prva biljka koju su ljudi koristili za druge stvari, osim isključivo za prehranu. Dakle, 8000 godina prije Krista još postoje podaci da se konoplja koristila i onda društveni aspekt cijeli je nekako koncipiran kroz povijest, šta su ljudi radili dobro od hipi pokreta i šta nije bilo dobro. Zbog toga na kakvom je glasu ona danas.
Pa imamo čak i u Bibliji neke spomene kad je Jahve davao recept za ulje pomazanja Mojsiju, onda tu je došlo malo do greške u prijevodu, što kasnije poljska antropologinja Sula Bennett korigira, jer u današnjim prijevodima se spominje biljka kalamus, odnosno mirisna trska, a njezina teza je da se odnosilo na biljku kanabis, a to njezinu tezu je potvrdilo i židovsko sveučilište iz Izraela, koje je najkompetentnije sveučilište u Izraelu.
Kad pogledate činjenice oko sebe i stvari oko sebe malo kakve jesu, 2,5% svijeta konzumira kanabis na svakodnevnoj bazi za rekreativne svrhe. To je podatak iz World Health Organization iz 2010. godine. Dakle, svaki od njih bi trebao postati narkoman, ako je takva šablona, ali na kraju krajeva onda možemo isto tako reći. Ja smatram da su statistike jednostavno krive, jer svaki narkoman koji dođe kod svog psihijatra kaže da je počeo sa marihuanom, a nije, nego je počeo sa cigaretama i alkoholom.
Cannabis plant could be one of the most useful plants that
Konoplja je možda i jedna od najkorisnijih biljaka koje trenutno postoje na planetu. Kanabis nudi najbolja poznata biljna vlakna. Vlakna konoplje su među najčvršćim vlaknima koje možemo dobiti prerodom bilja. Tu je zatim i sjeme, koje sadrži jedno od najzdravijih ulja biljnog porijekla. Tu je naravno i medicinska primjena biljke kanabisa. Dakle, uzmete li u obzir sve te tri stvari, nije čudo da mnogi ljudi tvrde kako ne postoji korisnija biljka od konoplje. Još jedna moguća primjena konoplje, koja se ne može nazvati striktno medicinskom, odnosi se na pitanje životnog stila. Mnogi tvrde da kanabis djeluje na smanjivanje stresa u svakodnevnom životu. To je, siguran sam, nešto kompleksnija uporaba konoplje, no svejedno možete zamisliti kako bi se na mnogo načina mogla primijeniti u svrhu poboljšanja i olakšavanja života.
Dakle, vrijeme je da se pozabavimo medicinskim mogućnostima konoplje. Za početak objasnite nam razliku između onog što zovemo industrijskom konopljom i konoplje koju ne zovemo industrijskom.
Well, what happened years ago to villainize the plant to the public, the government and William Randolph Hearst and the big money, they renamed strains of hemp with a lot of resin. They renamed it marijuana. Well, marijuana is just one of over 400 different slang terms that are used worldwide to describe the cannabis and or hemp plant. All through history it was known as hemp. So they use that word to villainize it. But industrial hemp is simply hemp that grows. Most industrial hemp is quite tall because they look for the long fiber. But it grows buds. It looks the same from a distance as what they would call marijuana. But it has very little resin on it, so it has very little medicinal effect. It's the strains that have a great deal of resin, especially the strains I like to use are the heavy indica strains that make you sleepy. Those are the most medicinal, and we've just, literally history calls hemp a panacea. I mean, if you go back into the 1800s and you look at the old pharmacopoeias, they used hemp for over 600 different conditions. Over half the medicine made worldwide came from the hemp plant. Then suddenly in the early 1900s, it was outlawed as a medicine and it was denied from the public. And that was done just through corruption. You know, big money controlling the planet, moving the public to do what they want them to do. I mean, we can't blame the governments of today. We've all been brainwashed about this plant. We've been lied to. But now the truth is coming out. And when that truth comes out, we have no alternative but to go back to that and use the hemp plant properly. Because if we don't, the human race is going to go extinct. We're poisoning our planet.
Danas ste najpoznatiji po filmu Bijeg od lijeka, Run from the Cure, koji se može vidjeti na internetu. Ispričajte nam zapravo početke tog filma, ali mogli bismo zapravo odmah početi od zaključka, pa da ljudi ne držimo u neizvjesnosti. Koja je tema i predmet filma Bijeg od lijeka?
Well, the topic of the film is simply to show people what the hemp plant is really about, you know, the medicinal aspects of it. And it's a documentary, it's an hour long, and but it shows, you know, like what is going on, that's key, you know, what's holding it back, the corruption that's holding it back. Towards the end of it, it shows me going to court over this, and it was totally ridiculous. I mean, a court is, when a government gets ahead of themselves and they wind up putting policies out and laws and acts that really don't make any sense. Well, the courts are there, they're supposed to be there to protect the citizens from the government's doing such things. But instead, they go along with the government because they're all making money. It's a corporate world we live in. Countries like Canada, United States, they're not countries, they're corporations. But people that live there don't know that. You know, the courts we have in Canada and United States, we are under common law. But if you go to, try to find a court in Canada or the United States, none of them are real. There's no real common law courts anymore. All they have are these de facto courts, courts of adjudication. And the average person doesn't know it, but you have the right to refuse their services. And you have the right to step back under common law. Well, the minute you do that, you're no longer guilty of anything, because growing hemp is not a crime under common law.
Ključna teza je zapravo otkriće koje ste dokumentirali u filmu jest medicinski i ljekoviti učinci ulja od konoplje. Prije ste spomenuli da su svim ovim starim tinkturama bili dijelovi ili su bile napravljene na temelju ulja. Međutim, samo ulje od konoplje, čisto kako iziđe iz konoplje, čini se da ima najveće učinke. Kakve sve učinke ste imali, kakva sve imate iskustva sa liječenjem ljudi sa uljem od konoplje, koliko ga je teško napraviti?
Well, back in Canada, after I cured my own cancer, and I'd done many other things for me medicinally, but after I cured my own cancer, I started supplying it to other people who had medical conditions. And I also started going to all the government, the different political parties, the Cancer Society, news and science shows that were popular in Canada. I was even to the United Nations. Nobody would do a thing. Like they just won't go there. But I mean, basically the situation we're in today, they have to go there because people are dying at alarming rates. The cancer rates are right through the roof. And all these other diseases like Alzheimer's, Crohn's, and people dying for no reason. When you make this oil properly, and it's made from the right strains, what I tell people to do, like that have terminal cancer, the idea is to ingest about 60 grams or 60 milliliters of this oil. It usually takes them about 90 days to accomplish that. But at the end of 90 days, most times their cancers are gone. They're cured.
Možete li ispričati svoje iskustva? Kako ste uopće došli do otkrića tih učinaka ili ponovnog otkrića tih učinaka ulja od konoplje i je li to netko radio i prije vas koliko znate?
Well, what happened, about a year after I suffered a head injury in 1997, and they put me on all these chemicals and they made me nothing but worse. But about a year after I was injured, I watched an episode of The Nature of Things with Dr. David Suzuki in Canada. It's a very popular show. And it showed people on there smoking marijuana for their conditions. So I didn't have any hemp in the house at the time. I went out and I bought some and tried it, because I never looked at it like a medicine. But when I compared it with the pills the doctors were giving me, it was better. And I went to the doctors and I told them, give me a prescription for hemp. And they wouldn't do it. And then in 1999, I was in my doctor's office one day, and although like smoking it did help me, it was beneficial. I thought, if you could make this stronger. So I said to the doctor, I said, what would you think if I took the hemp plant and made the essential oil from it and ingested it like a medication? And he said that would be a much more medicinal way to use it. But he wouldn't give me a prescription. So after 5 years of chemicals, one day in the doctor's office, he just told me, he said, we've tried everything that we know. We have nothing that can help you. My head was ringing 24 hours a day. My blood pressure, I had problems with that. And he just looked at me and he said, you're on your own. So I started taking the hemp oil. In the beginning, I was scared to death of it because I didn't really know what it was. I mean, I knew it was from the plant, but I didn't have the history, that I have today. So I started taking tiny doses of it, and in a very short time. My thinking, because the chemicals had clouded my thinking ability. My thinking ability cleared up. My arthritis went away in my knees, which I'd had for years. I also cured a very bad third-degree burn with it, with no scars. It was such a learning curve. But it was after I cured my own cancer, my own skin cancer with it, that because I went in, I had one operated on surgically, and I was supposed to go back for the other 2 areas at a later date. So it was about a week after I'd had the surgery done that I was looking at it one night with a mirror, and I'd heard this Medical School of Virginia study back in the 1970s, and it said that THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, has been found to kill cancer cells. Well, the oil I had was full of THC, so I just thought, well, why not? So I put a little bit of oil on each cancer. I put a bandage on them both, and I never felt a thing. So 4 days later, I go down, take the bandages off, and it's just pink skin. Well, then I started telling people that I knew, I've cured my own cancer with this. And people literally, they laughed at me. And then, so within 7 weeks, the cancer that they had taken off surgically, it came back. So same thing, I applied the oil. 4 days later, took the bandage off. That's over 8 years ago. I've never had to retreat them. I went down to the doctor's office. I have my pathology report back in Canada, and it states right on it, basal cell carcinoma. That's what I had. That's skin cancer. So I think I have the right to say that I found a cure for cancer, or this is a cure for cancer. I don't think I'm the one that found it. I really think that many people have found it, but they've always been able to squash it. But when we brought out Run from the Cure, well, before the Run from the Cure, on our internet, like our internet site, Phoenix Tears, we've been telling people for years how to produce their own oil. But we did the same thing in the documentary. And now that documentary, millions of people all over the world have seen it. And millions of people now are making the medicine and using it.
Znate li koliko postoji znanstvenih istraživanja o konoplji, odnosno njenim medicinskim učincima, i postoje li uopće? I ko su najveći stručnjaci za tu temu danas?
I think the greatest experts actually, I know a lot of these people personally. And like Dr. Malasham, of course, the discoverer of THC, Dr. Lemire Hanoush, he works with Dr. Malasham in Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's discovered anandamide, and they're doing some great research down there now. In the United States, we have Dr. Robert Malamud. He teaches at the University of Colorado, and there's nobody on this earth can explain the endocannabinoid system that we all have within our bodies better than Bob Malamud. I mean, he had the CB1, CB2 receptors, but Bob can explain it so anyone can understand it. So these are the men that I consider to be the greatest experts on this planet.
Je li bilo u proteklih 50 godina ili 100 znanstvenih istraživanja učinaka konoplje o kojima ste vi upravo sada govorili?
Well, there hasn't been a great deal of research done on the natural substance, the natural essential oil from the hemp plant. You know, the drug companies, they've been trying to make synthetic THC. Supposedly, the idea was, in around 1975, Gerald Ford, who was then president of the United States, what had happened, so the Medical School of Virginia study was supposed to prove that cannabis caused cancer. Instead, it proved just the opposite. So then they shut that study down, and Gerald Ford passed all the rights to research to the pharmaceutical companies. And their plan was to take the high out of it. Well, it's stupid anyway. You don't want to take the high. It's part of the high that makes you sleepy. It makes you sleep, and that's an essential part of healing. And it's part of the high that kills your pain. But, I find it absurd what they said anyway, because, when you look at what pharmaceutical companies supply, like substances like OxyContin and all these other Demerol, all these harmful drugs and opiates and things like that that are addictive and dangerous, and they will get you high, but they're not worried about the high from them. They're worried about the high from cannabis. It's all a lie. There is no harm. Nobody has ever died in history with the use of this medicine. Nobody has ever died from smoking cannabis, although I look at smoking cannabis as being medicinal to a degree. But you're never going to cure your cancer by smoking it. You have to start ingesting the oil, and you can use it by ingestion. That's my favorite way. It can be used as a suppository also. Vaporizing is very good. And it can be used topically on skin cancers and diabetic ulcers that won't heal, burns, psoriasis. It can be mixed with face creams or body lotions and just applied everywhere. And especially in today's world where we're scared to go out in the sun because of the UV rays, well, put a little bit of suntan lotion with some hemp oil in it, go out in the sun again.
Kada ste bili oduševljeni i iznenađeni vlastitim izlječenjem pomoćulja od konoplje, što se potom događalo? Koliko sam shvatio, počeli ste to govoriti ljudima, pa su vam se smijali, tu smo stali u priči. Na koji način ste poslije nastojali promovirati tu ideju i kakav je bio odgovor ljudi, da li su počeli dolaziti do vas? Koliko je zapravo ljudi do danas izliječeno po vašem iskustvu pomoću ulja od konoplje?
Oh, I know thousands of people that have used it. I supplied the oil to thousands of people. I started supplying the oil for nothing. I was growing the plants, and then I would produce the essential oil. And I started with friends and people I knew that had skin conditions and problems, and it was just working one miracle after another. And then in 2004, I went to our local paper in the Spring Hill Record, and they did a full-page article detailing everything I was doing, picture of me and everything. And but it was a year later that finally the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they came and raided me, and they took 1,620 plants out of my backyard that year. But I never stopped. They charged me and everything. They charged me with trafficking, although I was giving the medicine away. They charged me with trafficking, possession, and cultivation. Well, I had to grow the plants to be able to produce the medicine. So 2006, I went right back at it again. I had another 1,100 clones in my backyard. In 2006, they came again and stole the crop. This time, they didn't have a search warrant or anything. They just come in and said, we're with the marijuana eradication program. And I wasn't even arrested. They just went in the backyard and took the plants. But I mean, the problem is, due to those raids that the RCMP staged, many people died. Because, I was using this, I was growing these plants, making the medicine, and giving it to people who were dying from cancer. They come and they take the plants I need. Well, I had a little bit of money at the time, so I would go out, and I actually went out and bought material to make the oil from, and then still continued to give it away until I didn't have any money left. I was out to prove this. And it's something that, anybody with a conscience, if you know how to cure cancer, and you're sitting there talking to someone who has cancer, could you be quiet about it? Would you not tell them? So I just did, I think, what any rational person should do. But I supplied oil to, I'd say in the vicinity of somewhere around 2,500 people or more came directly to my home with all types of medical conditions. Everything from arthritis to AIDS. It works on everything. And so I dealt with all those people. And then on top of that, I shipped it all over Canada. People would contact me through the mail, but I didn't ship it out of the country. I just shipped it within Canada.
Jeste li u nekakvim suđenjima na sudu pokušali dovesti kao svjedoke liječnike koji su pratili pacijente koji su se izliječili pomoću ulja od konoplje ili same pacijente koji posvjedočili da im se tako nešto događalo? Ako ih je bilo toliko tisuća i ako su tu bili sudovi, pretpostavljam da je bilo mogućnosti za to.
Well, during my court case, I went through a charter challenge in Canada. At first, I gathered 48 sworn affidavits from different people that had used the oil. The judge just said that they were anecdotal. They didn't mean anything. And then he sat there and said that I didn't present any life-threatening conditions. Well, post-concussion syndrome that's what I have, and with the blood pressure, it is life-threatening if you don't have the proper medication. And on top of that, I cured my skin cancer. The judge knew this, but...
Što je sa tim svjedocima? Pozivali ste ljude na sud?
Well, no, the witnesses came in, that happened in the following court case. This was the charter challenge, was the first thing I did. But anyway, the judge, he came out against it. He said I didn't exhibit any life-threatening conditions, which was an out-and-out lie. And he had no right to even make that determination. He's not a doctor. So then I went into the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia with it. Same prosecutors, same judge. I had 10 patients ready to testify, and I had brought in 6 doctors. They wouldn't let them on the stand. I had scientific evidence, boxes of it. They wouldn't let me introduce it. So in the end, I wound up testifying on my own behalf, and I did a pretty good job, I think, because in the end, the Crown prosecutor, he was seen leaving the jury room 3 minutes before they came in with my verdict. He tampered with the jury to make sure that I was found guilty, just to make the public believe he's some kind of criminal. But yet, when the judge sentenced me, he said, in my 34 years in the legal system, I've never seen a case like this. He said there was no criminal intent. And then he came right out and said, the scientific evidence does exist to back up everything he's saying, plus he has all these patients that are saying the same thing. So I was facing possibly 12 years in jail. They gave me a $2,000 fine and a gun restriction. And the only reason I got the gun restriction, there was no guns in my home, but anybody that is charged with trafficking in Canada, you automatically get a 10-year gun restriction, which makes no sense either.
Na internetu je moguće u vašem filmu vidjeti kako se proizvodi ulje od konoplje. Pretpostavljam da nije kompliciran proces, pa nećemo sada na njega gubiti vrijeme, s obzirom da pretpostavljam da većina ljudi ima priključak na internet. U kojoj mjeri je ovaj sintetski THC učinkovit, manje učinkovit ili više učinkovit od prirodnog THC-a?
Well, no, industrial hemp is not going to produce the medicine, you know, the beneficial medicine that the heavy strains with a lot of resin, that's what you need. So it's hard to compare them medicinally. But I think really, in reality, I think all hemp, even weak hemp, would have some medicinal aspects. But if you're dying with cancer, you want the very best. You know, you need the very best. And you almost have to see the miracles this medicine can work with your own eyes to believe it. But I always tell people, I said, look, don't believe a word I'm saying. You don't have to. Nobody has to believe a thing I'm saying. Simply go out, get 30 grams of good hemp bud, preferably indica, and make the oil. We have very detailed instructions right there on our website at Phoenix Tears. Follow those instructions, produce the oil. Take that oil out, find somebody with a diabetic ulcer, a skin cancer, or a bad burn, put the oil on it, and put a bandage on. Then every 3 days, apply new oil and a new bandage and watch what happens. Now, if that's not curing cancer, and if it's not healing diabetic ulcers and third-degree burns with no scars, I mean, we have to be insane not to be using this. Look at children in burn units. They take them in after a house fire. They have to go through countless surgeries, skin grafts, and they're subject to infections. Well, the minute you take oil and you put it on a bad burn, it's a natural antibiotic, and it's a natural anesthetic. Within minutes, the burn goes out of it. It stops burning, it stops hurting. And it heals in no time. I mean, that hand was hanging in gobs. It was horrible. I mean, I should be all scarred. 11 days. 11 days, totally healed. Just pink skin left.
Hvala vam na ovom razgovoru. Želim vam sreću i do neke sljedeće prilike. Doviđenja. Bila je ovo dakle priča o jednoj jedinoj biljci koja može, kao što smo čuli u prvom dijelu emisije, zadovoljiti sve potrebe čovečanstva bez negativnih učinaka na okoliš, tlo ili zdravlje. Dapače, baš je zdravlje ono gdje je posebno učinkovita i zapravo čini se skoro nevjerojatnim da takva svestrana biljka uopće može postojati, ali evo je tu. Čeka da je prepoznamo, posadimo u vrtovima, poljima, ogoljenim obrncima velebita kad se radi o industrijskoj konoplji, da nahrani tlo, izvari iz njega otrove, da nas obuče, ozdravi, grije, pa i vozi. Uz ovakve dobre vijesti još vam samo mogu poželjeti laku noć.